So we're about a week removed from Crota's Reprisal coming out. Um, Obviously, contest 2 days. I'm recording this on Wednesday, so the day before it goes up. Um, so it's been like 5, 6 days maybe. Anyway, wanted to take a minute, give my feedback on the raid, mostly in terms of just the raid as a whole, not referring to contest or challenge. And yeah, so I'll do this encounter by encounter, and then at the end I'll have overall bits and stuff like that. The opening, referring to the abyss. I think it's way more boring now. I think I think it's always bad when you force somebody to slow down in an encounter. Um, Obviously you can't just run through to the end anymore. You've got the oh, what's it called? My brain's failing me. Not replenish. Whatever the things you're dunking the chalice into to light the other lamps that you have to do in order for the last plate to be turned on. You know what I'm talking about if you've done the raid, and if not, I'm so sorry. I'm so stupid. Preserve, Jesus Christ, got it. All right. Anyway, I think having the preserve mechanic be that way is very boring. I would have preferred something again, just because it takes so long. It's just such a long walkthrough. Ooh, and yes, obviously you can go however fast you want. I'm just saying it's to me it's boring. I would have much preferred something along the lines of the the alternative challenge for the encounter that you can do all anytime you want is to stop you from getting 10 stacks of darkness. I wish instead that the maze was basically the exact same that it used to be. I like the pendulums and stuff. It's fine to be like um transformed, I guess would be the word I'm looking for. Um the way that it is with the pendulum swing, and maybe the path is a little bit different, which I don't know if that's true or not. It's been a long time since I ran D1 Crota. Um, but instead of having it be, preserve the chalice to turn on the lamps, to do further lamps, to then do the plate, instead of that, I would have much rathered it just been go fast and as a team. So if you got to 10 stacks of darkness, you just died. And obviously that doesn't mean you're going to team wipe, but you can only handle so many reses. So I think that would have been a lot funner of a encounter. Again, slowing things down, I think is just not it. That's just my opinion. I don't personally like it. The bridge, I should say, first off, the bridge, I don't think I fully understand. Obviously I did on day one, and then I ran through the two clears last week, haven't done it this week yet. I don't think I fully understand it, but enough to be able to give the feedback that I'm giving that I don't think will impact it, but if I'm wrong, I'm sure somebody will correct me. I think the bridge is also boring. To be fair, I think it's always been the low light encounter of Crota. Um, I think the ending goes too long once you have everybody across. It takes way too long for the ogres to come out to be able to kill the ogres for the gatekeepers, the horde of gatekeepers to come out. I just think that entire segment just runs too long. I wish it was more like, you dunk the fifth sword and then maybe like 3 or 4 barriers come out, you kill them immediately, and then that insta spawns the ogres, and then the ogres insta spawn the gatekeepers, something like that. Also, I think that and they did this in Ghosts of the Deep, where we're now having more infinite ads. We've taken to having ad density as not real ad density, not like a lot of ads spawn at once, but instead just ads keep spawning. I don't I don't like that in this particular situation. Like, I don't know how other teams handled it on day one. I haven't gone back and watched anybody do contest clears and stuff on bridge. But whoever was crossing first, Jesus. Um, because the way I was doing it was crossing, and then I was just slowly killing my gatekeeper, and I was using woven mail to do it because basically that was the only way for me to survive over there. It would have been a lot funner to me if I was able to, actually kill the acolytes and the boomer, and then, have a few seconds to damage the gatekeeper just one on one, opposed to every time you kill an acolyte or a boomer, another one immediately walks out of the door. It just instantly replaces whatever you've killed, and I don't like that concept. If you go over there and there's like 3 boomers and 12 acolytes and you have to kill them all, and then you've got like 20 seconds of reprieve, that's fine. That's cool. just don't make it this infinite. I don't like the infinite spawning. It's just I'm not a fan of it. I'm not a fan of the literal infinite ad spawn type deal that is. Anyway, that's it for Bridge. Moving on to Air Ute. I actually really liked Air Ute's changes. I think Air Ute is a much funner encounter now. I think it is a much better encounter. The only critiques I really have is I wish it felt a little bit more consistent to progress the ad spawns that you need. I know it's just based off kills, but sometimes it feels like you need to kill a couple more or acolytes. Or maybe it feels like sometimes you're like, hey, why is it taking so long? Did a knight go hide? And you go and look around and there's not a knight, and then another one will finally come out of the door, and you're like, okay, that was weird. I don't know. Maybe that's just that one might just be me. I'm not entirely sure about that. The one thing I do wish is I wish that the expunge mechanic worked differently. I wish instead of, and this will be the same for Crota actually, I wish instead of doing damage, it was a stagger, like an intended stagger. Because when you have, and especially less so for Crota, but more so for Air Ute, when you have a boss that moves around a bunch like that, it would be really nice to have a built-in mechanic that you can just stall them for like a second or two. And I'm not asking for, 10 seconds. I'm not asking for an expunge that just freezes her the entire DPS, but 5 seconds, maybe even just 3 seconds it'd just be nice. Is all I'm saying. Anyway, overall, like I said, I liked Air Ute's changes. Those are just a little bit of feedback. Then you've got Crota. I don't really like the changes to Crota. I understand, and keep in mind, when I say I don't like the changes to any of this stuff, I'm not saying things shouldn't have been changed. I understand if Crota came back in the same way that Crota was in D1, everybody would have cleared this raid in about 15 minutes. And that's, yes, an exaggeration, but also, no, it's not. I don't like the changes to Crota. I wish they kept the sword damage as the output damage for him instead of inverting it so that you use the swords to kneel him and then do actual damage. Again, I wish the expunge kind of just made him kneel again, as opposed to doing extra damage. Get a second or two, get a couple seconds of safe damage. Make it feel like well is less important. We've talked about how well is very potent in the end game. These are ways to make it so that well does not feel as necessary in the end game. Which obviously, yes, well does still give you a damage boost. But I'm saying, I know a lot of groups on day one who had people switching to warlocks in Crota's encounter because they were like, well, he just keeps slamming us. We have no health. We have to find a way to live. This is a way that's a type of way to get around that, is by giving us real mechanics to stop these bosses from just blasting us the entire time. It's just an idea. It's just a thought. I said that I didn't like the inverting of, sword to kneel, actual damage to hurt. I wish it was more so that the expunges maybe were used to make him kneel in the first place. Just like I said, that's why it would kind of feed into having extra ones to keep stunning him. I think maybe 2 or 3 people need to be enlightened and go up and expunge him during, while he's walking around to drop the shield completely. I do like the Oversoul needs to be broken by somebody enlightened. I think that's a great change. I don't think that, the Oversoul just being straight up damageable would have worked well. Finally for Crota, I wish that the final stand was, and this is again going into I wish the sword damage was the actual damage. If you wanted to make a final stand, which I understand, and final stands are something that I think are beneficial almost every time we have one against a raid boss, especially ones that are, so damage important. Like, I know Rolk on day one killed a lot of people because they couldn't get past his final stand, and Crota was the same way. I wish instead, because we know Crota can teleport, I wish once you did the damage, he teleported back either to his original spawn, I'm referring to his D1 spawn, so the farthest away towards the Oversoul, or he spawned back where he teleports back to where he is now, does the same animation, and while he's doing the animation, do it more like the bridge encounter when the bridge was remastered in D1 and when we had Age of Triumphs, where a bunch of swords spawn around him, everybody gets to pick one up, and you all just start slamming. I think that personally would have been more fun then again, it's just the damage thing. It's just the thing because I think that was one of the few things that did make Crota unique and fun, and you took it away with the swords not doing damage to him instead of just being pure damage. Um, but yeah, that's it for Crota. Overall, I'm not a fan of repeat mechanics in the sense of when a raid uses one thing throughout. We see it in pretty much all of Garden, and we've seen it all in, with the exception of the planets encounter, we see it all throughout Root. And there's different times where that's happened as well. Oh, and that's just a thing that's more recent than like older raids didn't really do it a ton, where it is just one persisting thing. This one obviously being the chalice persists. It's in the opening. It's in the abyss. It's at the bridge. It's in the in between. It's in the Shrieker hallway. It's in Air Ute, and it's in Crota. It's everywhere, and it gets tiring. I know that it's used in slightly different ways, but it gets tiring to just constantly see the same thing over and over again. That's just feedback for future raids. Um, Teaching mechanics before encounters actually I'm not a personal fan of, and what I mean by that is take example of, and dungeons do this a lot, which is why I'm not a fan of it because I don't think it belongs in raids. I think having it in dungeons is totally fine. Um, Again, the very opening when you walk up to the first plate, it teaches you how to gain enlightenment because you have to gain enlightenment to get into the raid basically, and then in between for the Shrieker hallway, it teaches you that if you're enlightened, you can walk through those doors. I think it is a lot funner if you drop down into the pit and then you have to learn how enlighten works. And I think it's especially funner if you go into Air Ute's room and then have to learn how to get into the wizard's room. Like it's not going to take you a ton more time if you think about it for 2 seconds and you're like, well, how do we get in here? I mean, clearly you're going to be like, well, what's the thing that use the buff? Duh. I'm just saying I don't like introducing the new mechanics in between the real encounters. That's just my opinion. That's how I feel about it. I don't like the fact that the sword wasn't touched at all. Like we have the basic sword, the basic Crota sword, the basic Hive sword. We don't have the one from Pit or some different variant that you could have made. It's just the same sword. I really would have liked, especially during the bridge encounter, if we had the one from Pit. I think that would have been a lot funner, personally, instead of again just the normal sword. But I think that's again something that's just how I feel like it would have been better, even if some other people would disagree. As I said, the first two encounters boring. Like they're just boring. They just feel the raid feels very slow. I think that Air Ute and Crota, even though again I don't particularly like how Crota's done, I think Crota's fine. It's just not how I would have liked it to be redone. And I think the first half of the raid very boring. The second half great, but the first half just it feels like it takes forever, ever comparatively. And I know you don't want I assume that Bungie doesn't just want people to just blitz through raids, have, like a 30-minute clear be the average time for an average group. So I get it, but also, I mean, just, again, the Abyss is just a lot of walking, and the bridge is just a lot of waiting around, it feels like. I think that the raid worked really well. That said, I feel like the raid worked really well on contest, which is, pretty common. I think raids tend to feel better on contest versus off contest because of the added difficulty. That's again my opinion. I think stuff is a lot less boring when you constantly have to be paying attention and trying, relatively your best to constantly live, opposed to you're not really thinking about the game anymore. You're just kind of going through the motions. Again, that's just my opinion. Anyway, in conclusion, with all that I've said, the only real thing I can say to end this would be Crota's no Wrath of the Machine.